Hello and welcome to a new edition of True Audio Files. Today I'm going to talk about Dreamboat Annie. Biggest reason for that is Mobile Fidelity has just come out with the new reissue on 45 RPM 2LP set and cut from an analog copy, or I should say they digitized an analog copy and then cut from the digital file that they made. So that's part of why it says Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab instead of original master recording. I got number 1261 out of the bunch. Hopefully you were able to see that. And I'm going to be comparing it today to two other versions. I have the Nautilus Half Speed Master version on this one. And I also have an early US pressing. I'm not sure how early it is, but it's an early US pressing. So also kind of want to talk about how I go about listening to these and doing an A-B comparison. So first thing I do is I listen to the new release or new reissue all the way through, in this case the Mobile Fidelity. Kind of listen to it to get an idea of its overall sound, but also to kind of see what songs are going to be the best ones to do an A-B comparison with. And then I also will do a level match on all of them to make sure that they are all within probably about a half a dB of one another when I play them back, so there can be no favoritism on any of them. And in this case, the Nautilus actually was cut much quieter than the other two. The other two were nearly identical in terms of how loud they were cut. So take that for what it's worth. And so in this case, I decided to do Magic Man and Soul of the Sea. And I'll explain my reasonings for Soul of the Sea anyways a little later, but let's start off with talking about the sound. I thought, I listened to the Mobile Fidelity, I thought it sounded really good. I thought it was well balanced. It didn't have the pronounced bass that sometimes the Mobile Fidelities tend to have, but it still had a great amount of bass to it. I thought it had a good mid-range warmth to it as well. And, the soundstage depth and width and height were all there and all sounded really good as well. The pressing was probably, it definitely wasn't the quietest Mofi I've ever had, but it certainly wasn't noisy either. So overall, was pretty pleased with how it came out. And then I listened to the Nautilus Half Speed. The Nautilus Half Speed was very good sounding as well. One of the things or a couple things that I did notice right off the bat though is the Half Speed definitely didn't have the bass that the Mobile Fidelity one had. It was still there, but it wasn't quite as present. And it also didn't seem to have that warmth, that mid-range warmth that the Mobile Fidelity one had. Overall, I'd say it sounded pretty similar beyond that. The soundstage width and the soundstage depth were all very similar or nearly identical, at least on Magic Man. So then I listened to the early US pressing, and the early US pressing definitely had a good sound to it. I think that, soundstage width, soundstage depth were pretty similar. It seemed like it had maybe a little bit deeper bass than the other two did, and not more than the Mobile Fidelity, but maybe more than the Nautilus. But, the EQ is very similar to the early US pressing in comparison. In comparison, I'm sorry, to the Nautilus, but the Nautilus and the early US pressing seemed to have not have that warmth that the Mobile Fidelity one had. So, but the one thing that I definitely stuck out to me is, when I decided to change over to Soul of the Sea, and I tried doing that mainly because, you had one thing that I noticed is kind of like there was some like chimes or percussion instruments that were playing, and they sounded like they're going above the other instruments. And then you had the sea sound effects too that were kind of panning left and right and things like that. So I thought that was a good demo. But the other thing that stuck out to me as well is the first couple of bass drum hits on the track definitely were more pronounced than the other ones, but on all three they sounded very similar in volume level. So the bass sound that I was getting on Magic Man definitely differed on all three, where it didn't seem to as much on Soul of the Sea. So, they were some subtle differences, but I would say overall they all sounded really, really, really good. I would probably give my nod a little bit to the mobile fidelity just because it seemed to have that warmth that the other two didn't quite have. And then, and it also had that soundstage height that I was talking about on Soul, to see that you just didn't have on the other two. But the other two are actually very, very close. And, I might even say and venture to say that I liked the early US pressing maybe a little bit better because of that deeper bass on Magic Man, but because they were very similar other than that. The other thing I would say is, I would love to be able to get a hold of the DBX version because I've heard that that sounds amazing, but you also need the DBX encoding, which I don't have, so I really wouldn't be able to do a true demo for it. So I can't say whether the Mofi sounds better than that one. I'd love to hear your take if you have that copy. I'd love to hear what you have found when kind of comparing those, and see if you have found that the DBX sounds better than the Mofi if you've gotten that one. So I'd love to hear your take on that. But my take is I definitely think that the new Mofi is an improvement. I wouldn't say it's a vast improvement, but it's definitely an improvement. So if this is an album that you really like and you really are striving for that best sounding version, and maybe you don't have the DBX and you don't have DBX encoding, maybe give this mobile fidelity one a try. It's it's not a one step, so it's not going to be super crazy expensive. So I would also be very interested to hear what the Super Audio CD is going to sound like when it comes out, because I often find that the Mofi Super Audios are mastered a little bit differently than the vinyl from a sound quality perspective. So I'd be really interested to hear what that sounds like. But that is everything I have for this week. I would love to hear your take. Do you have the new Mofi? And do you have the DBX? And have you done a comparison between the two? I'd love to hear some comments if you have. Also like to see if there is anything else out there or any other versions out there that people have heard that feel that might be superior to all of these ones I've talked about. So love to hear your takes on that too. But that's everything I have for this week. I want to thank you for watching. Hit that like button if you liked what you saw. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'd love to see some new subscribers. I want to say thank you very much. I want you to have a good rest of your day and a great rest of the week. Thanks a lot.